Okay, so in this industry, we have the rare luxury of getting to do what we love for a living, and sometimes getting to do it with people that we come to love.
Few people realize how much heartbreak hides behind John Travolta's legendary smile. From losing the love of his life at just 23 to enduring the deaths of his mother, son, and wife, his journey is marked by repeated, devastating loss. Cancer struck his world again and again, each time leaving deeper scars. How does someone survive grief on this scale and keep going? Now in his 70s, Travolta is finally opening up about the pain, resilience, and hard-earned wisdom behind the fame, revealing a story far more powerful than Hollywood ever showed us. Early love and first loss. At just 23 years old, John Travolta's life was on the brink of superstardom when heartbreak visited him for the first time. While filming a television movie called The Boy in the Plastic Bubble, he met Diana Hyland, an actress who would become the most profound love of his early life. Despite playing mother and son on screen, a deep connection blossomed between them, fueled by a shared intensity and understanding that neither expected. Their romance was passionate, swift, and full of promise, becoming a rare haven amid the pressures of rising fame. Diana was more than just a love interest. She was someone who truly saw John for who he was beneath the bright lights. For the first time, he experienced what it really meant to be in love, comparing it to flying. Something exhilarating and freeing. However, Diana carried a secret that shadowed their relationship. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer years earlier and had undergone a mastectomy. At the time they began dating, she believed the cancer was behind her, hopeful for a future they could build together. Plans to live together, house hunting, and even marriage were on the table as John juggled the demands of his burgeoning career, especially with the release of Saturday Night Fever on the horizon. But all those dreams unraveled with terrifying speed. Diana's health worsened drastically as the cancer spread, transforming hope into a sharp and sudden loss. The diagnosis came so late that she only fully accepted her fate about 2 weeks before her death. John dropped everything, flying back to Los Angeles to be by her side, sacrificing his own career momentum to hold her as she slipped away. On March 27, 1977, Diana died in his arms. John described the moment vividly, the breath leaving her body, as one of the most wrenching experiences of his life. At an age when many have yet to face such loss, John was grappling with grief so profound it seemed impossible to bear. In the months after losing Diana, John was left to navigate a grief that no young person should have to endure. The crushing loneliness and sorrow felt relentless, and the world seemingly paused around him as he struggled for understanding. What made this loss so unbearable wasn't just the death of a loved one, but the abrupt farewell to a future he had dared to imagine. Still, this heartbreak would not be his last encounter with tragedy. Less than 2 years afterward, fate struck again in a hard way. While John was still struggling with the emotional aspect of it, cancer invaded his life for the second time in a way that was both familiar and heartbreaking, through his mother, Helen Travolta. The second hit would test him in such a way that it was impossible to separate the suffering inflicted by his mother from his nascent public identity. In the first period of John's mourning, the learned resilience was mixed with vulnerability, and the questions left unanswered were about the future of such a grief. The strong mark that Diana's fight against cancer and untimely death left behind not only affected his private life, but also influenced his career choices. John could not escape the personal nightmare of the fading Hollywood ascent and had to face it. The very significant early loss of John Travolta gave birth to a tale that was going to take decades to unfold, full of both tragedy and the will to survive. To understand this chapter, it is necessary to understand the full scope of John Travolta's journey, one in which love and sorrow are never separated. As this story deepens, the next heartbreak that shaped John's life came not from romance, but from the bond with his own mother. A mother's battle. Helen Travolta was a figure of strength and support in John's life. a mother whose influence extended beyond the home into the heart of his career. Born Helen Cecilia Burke, she was an actress and singer who inspired not only John, but all 6 of her children to embrace the performing arts. Her passion for theater and music filled the household, nurturing creativity and a love of performance that would define the Travolta family's identity. Later, Helen became a dedicated high school drama and English teacher, passing that same passion to others. More than just a mentor or supporter, Helen was John's protector. As the youngest child, John had a sensitive and gentle nature that made him especially close to her. Friends from John's childhood remember a vulnerability in him that Helen understood intuitively. For John, she wasn't just a mother, but an anchor in a world that could feel overwhelming, especially as he faced the pressures of rising fame and personal loss. When Helen was diagnosed with breast cancer, she made a heartbreaking decision: to shield John from the news for as long as possible. She knew how raw and fragile he was after losing Diana just 18 months earlier. To protect him from further pain, she kept her illness private, carrying the burden alone until the time was right to share the truth. Eventually, she could no longer hide the reality, and when John learned of her diagnosis, his world was shattered anew. The caregiver role he stepped into was a harsh contrast to the young lover who had known such sudden loss before. John visited Helen daily, offering all the comfort he could as he tried to lift her spirits through music and performance, singing, impromptu shows, anything to bring light into her darkest moments. The bond, through art and devotion, revealed a depth of intimacy and love that was nothing short of miraculous. Yet, even with all the attempts, cancer was still unstoppable. On December 3, 1978, Helen Travolta, at the age of 66, passed away, leaving John with a gap that would affect him for the rest of his life. The death of 2 of the most significant females in such a brief period to the same ailment entrenched the shadow that breast cancer cast over his family. John's personal mourning was coupled with the uncertainty of his professional career. The disco era that brought him fame was already on the decline, and his following movies only met with moderate success. Critics began to ask if he was actually a star of the moment, while John was battling with the loss and doubting his career. The upsurge of career chaos and personal loss made him go through a very difficult and challenging period. However, John did show great perseverance still. The 1980s were hard, both personally and professionally, but he slowly started to heal. His emotional recovery was slow and opened the door for future opportunities of love and success. A new chapter was silently being written while the wounds were still fresh. The death of his mother meant not only an end, but also a turning point in the journey towards resilience. Helen's fiery spirit and unshakable support were still there as shining, guiding stars, and John drew inspiration from them to continue his struggle, even when the world seemed to be against him. The next phase of John's life brought the hope and renewal that only love can offer, steering him towards a future he might have thought impossible after so much loss, career struggles, and healing. The 1980s were a testing time for John Travolta in the public eye. Riding the high waves of success from films like Saturday Night Fever and Grease, he suddenly faced a Hollywood landscape that was changing rapidly. The disco wave that had defined his breakout role was waning, and John found himself battling perception issues as critics and audiences wondered if he was a temporary sensation. This professional uncertainty coincided with the deep personal grief he was still processing from recent losses. Films following his initial hits struggled at the box office, and John's career momentum slowed considerably. The industry that once seemed to promise endless opportunity transformed into a place of doubt and challenge. At the same time, the emotional weight of losing Diana and Helen lingered heavily, making it difficult to navigate this career turbulence without the emotional reserves many others take for granted. But amid the setbacks, John began the process of emotional healing. Slowly but steadily, he prepared himself for a new chapter, one that would involve taking chances on both love and work. This period was not marked by loud comebacks or immediate success, but by a quiet rebuilding of self and spirit. His resilience grew in small ways, through personal reflection and gradual acceptance of grief's long shadow. By the late 1980s, John was ready to open his heart again. In 1988, while filming The Experts, he met Kelly Preston, an actress who brought warmth and stability to his life. This connection sparked a romance that offered a fresh start after years marked by loss and hardship. Kelly's presence helped anchor John back into hope and the possibility of joy. In 1991, John and Kelly married in a private midnight ceremony in Paris, symbolizing a new beginning steeped in love and shared dreams. This commitment marked a turning point, not only personally but professionally. John's career soon found rejuvenation, culminating in a critically acclaimed resurgence with films like Pulp Fiction. While the world saw a star reborn on screen, John was quietly rebuilding his life behind the scenes. The decades of grief and trauma still shaped his perspective, but now there was a foundation of hope and partnership on which to stand. Kelly's influence would prove vital in helping him face future challenges, both personal and public. Healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks and moments of sorrow, but John's journey through the 1980s set the stage for the decades to come. He learned that survival was as much about emotional endurance as it was about professional perseverance. This era demonstrated John Travolta's ability to endure not only public scrutiny, but private heartbreak, transforming pain into quiet strength. With hope renewed, John's story now moves toward the family he would build with Kelly Preston, a chapter filled with love, but also its own unique challenges. Finding love again with Kelly Preston. After years marked by loss and uncertainty, John Travolta found a new beacon of hope in Kelly Preston. They met on the set of the 1988 film The Experts, where Kelly's warmth and talent quickly drew John in. Their connection was immediate, a rare spark of joy amid heavy shadows. For John, Kelly was not only a partner, but a best friend, someone who could stand beside him as he rebuilt his life. Their romance blossomed quietly but decisively. By 1991, they married in a private midnight ceremony in Paris, symbolizing a fresh start and renewed optimism. This intimate moment was more than a union. It was John reclaiming the possibility of happiness and stability after the pain of earlier years. Kelly's presence brought balance, helping John navigate the lingering scars from past heartbreaks. Their partnership was defined by deep companionship and shared dreams. Together, they planned a family and looked forward to building a future grounded in love. Kelly was a steadying force, not just emotionally but also practically, offering John a sense of normalcy and hope that had felt elusive before. It was clear that this relationship was a turning point where healing and hope intertwined. In 1992, their first child, a son named Jet, was born, followed by daughter Ella Blue 2 years later, and later another son, Benjamin, in 2010. On the surface, John's life now had the image of success and family fulfillment. But beneath this was a layer of silent challenges as the couple managed their growing family's needs with discretion and dedication. Kelly and John managed to keep their family life away from the eyes of the public, especially concerning Jet, their son, who was diagnosed with autism and suffered from epilepsy. They were practically devoted to Jet's care, the major issue being the public and the media all the time, and Jet having a kind of normalcy through silence. John was hardly ever without Jet. He was always there, and he was very attentive. In every moment, he was the one loving the son with a father's protection. Buddies and people living behind the walls in the Bahamas, where the family spent most of their holidays, were the lucky ones to see this inconceivable bond of father and son up close. The love between John and Jet was so strong that it could be clearly noticed through the daily interactions that were full of provocation and care. Fatherhood was the main role played by John, a man who had gone through a great loss, but now was living for his kids' love. John and Kelly brought up their special needs child with surprising boldness and privacy. This parental and marital dedication brings them closer, pulling back the curtains on a partnership that was always tested by challenge, but was always sustained by commitment. Their family life, rich with love and yet woven with unique struggles, was a clear indication of their complex journey together. Public opinion always swirling around John's career talks, he did not have to cope with the other side of the coin. which was less glamorous. It was this unquestioned devotion that was mostly unnoticed, which in fact was what defined his life in that period. Through Kelly, John found a recharged purpose, not only as a husband and actor, but as a nurturing caregiver and parent. Their narrative was one of love in adversity, quietly resilient and profound. The promise and challenges of family life with Kelly planted seeds of hope even as they prepared for hurdles yet to come. Hurdles that would test their strength beyond what they had ever imagined. Parenthood and private challenges. The arrival of John and Kelly's children brought immense joy, but also unexpected trials that tested their family's resilience. Jet's diagnosis of autism and ongoing struggles with seizure disorders introduced a layer of complexity to parenting that required constant vigilance and care. The couple managed these challenges largely away from the public eye, maintaining privacy to protect their son's well-being and to focus on his needs without distraction. John's dedication was unwavering. He became Jet's primary advocate and constant companion, whether on set, traveling, or simply in daily life. Friends recall seeing John bring Jet everywhere, ensuring he never felt isolated or excluded. This hands-on approach showed a father's fierce love, matched only by the challenges of managing a demanding condition in a world that often lacked understanding. The family took extensive precautions to safeguard Jet's safety, employing 2 nannies and installing alarms in key areas of their home to help manage seizure risks. Despite these efforts, tragedy struck on January 2, 2009, while the family was vacationing in the Bahamas. Jet suffered a fatal seizure after hitting his head on the bathtub, and despite John's immediate and desperate attempts at CPR, he could not be saved. The shock of losing Jet was a devastating blow no parent should have to face. At just 16 years old, Jet's sudden passing plunged John and Kelly into a sorrow deeper than any before. The death was not just a loss of a child, but the shattering of a life built around hope, care, and unconditional love. It left a wound that redefined the family's emotional landscape. Compounding this nightmare was a grotesque attempt at exploitation. In the aftermath of Jet's death, an ambulance driver and a former Bahamian senator sought to extort $25 million from John and Kelly, threatening to reveal private details to the public. The trial that followed was highly publicized and added layers of trauma and stress to a grieving family already overwhelmed by loss. John testified in court, enduring the added burden of fighting to protect his family's privacy amid relentless pressure. Eventually, the emotional and psychological toll led the family to drop the case. This ordeal exemplified how tragedy can be exploited, underscoring the vulnerability even the most dedicated families face during moments of grief. In 2010, amid this healing process, Kelly gave birth to their youngest son, Benjamin. His arrival brought renewed energy and hope to John and Kelly's lives, offering a pathway toward rebuilding and honoring Jet's memory. The family slowly found ways to navigate their grief while embracing the joys of a new life. John established the John Travolta Foundation to support children with special needs, turning personal tragedy into a mission of advocacy and care. This act of generosity demonstrated John's resilience and commitment to using his platform for positive impact. Parenthood, with all its joy and pain, became a central pillar of his continued journey through loss and healing. John's love for his family propelled him through unimaginable grief. Yet the shadows of cancer and loss continued to follow. Even in these private moments of devotion, the challenges were far from over. The next chapter would bring a new test, as cancer struck again with relentless determination. Tragic loss of John Travolta. The joy of raising a family took a heartbreaking turn on January 2, 2009, when John and Kelly Travolta faced their most devastating loss, the death of their son, Jet. Jet, who was 16 years old at the time, had been born with autism and struggled with seizure disorders. His condition required round-the-clock care and constant vigilance. Despite every precaution, tragedy struck while the family was vacationing in the Bahamas. Jet suffered a seizure in the bathroom of their vacation home and hit his head on the bathtub. Although John rushed to his son's side and immediately began CPR, it was too late. The loss was sudden and shattering, a pain no parent can prepare for. For John and Kelly, Jet was not only a child, but a source of profound connection and purpose. Losing him ripped a huge hole in their lives. The impact of Jet's death was amplified by the deep bonds John shared with his son. Friends and neighbors remembered John's constant presence, always carrying or supporting Jet with love and tenderness. That closeness made the loss feel all the more unbearable, as if a part of John's own heart had been taken away. There was no public fanfare, just private anguish and grief. Following this tragedy, the family endured an additional cruel blow. An ambulance driver and a former Bahamian senator attempted to extort $25 million from John and Kelly. They threatened to expose private details about Jet's death unless they were paid. The effort to exploit the family's grief added a grotesque layer to their mourning. John heroically went to trial and testified against his abuser, keeping the family's privacy and dignity through the dark times. The Travoltas eventually dropped the case after the court procedure had taken its toll on them, and they decided to heal instead of fighting in public. The incident has shown how a disaster can even cause unwanted interference from unexpected sources. Death was not an obstacle to life. In the year 2010, Kelly had their youngest son named Benjamin, who was the family's new hope and renewal. The presence of Benjamin enabled the Travoltas to gradually get over their loss of a loved one and to restore their house of happiness. The family welcomed this second opportunity with mixed feelings, happiness, but also sadness. On the other hand, John turned his sorrow into a positive action by creating the Jet Travolta Foundation, which is committed to the welfare of children with special needs. This charitable deed became a lasting memorial for Jet, and was also a manifestation of John's determination to switch pain for good. It shone like a candle in the night. While the death of Jet was unbearable, however, John and Kelly's love and commitment to family stood strong. The magnitude of their love was the most powerful reason for their huge resilience. As they faced this profound devastation together, another shadow was looming. Cancer was about to strike the family once more, with heartbreaking consequences. Kelly Preston's cancer battle. In 2018, nearly 4 decades after cancer first entered John Travolta's life, it returned with a cruel familiarity. Kelly Preston, John's wife, received a diagnosis of breast cancer, the same disease that had taken Diana Hyland and Helen Travolta years before. The news must have shaken the family deeply, reopening wounds they hoped had healed. And yet, Kelly approached this battle with quiet strength and determination. Kelly chose to keep her diagnosis mostly private, avoiding public statements or social media updates. She declined to seek sympathy, instead focusing on fighting the illness with dignity and resolve. Receiving treatment at the renowned MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, she underwent 2 years of chemotherapy, radiation, and whatever other therapies her doctors recommended. Throughout her treatment, Kelly remained as active as possible. She even appeared with John in the 2018 film Gotti, marking her final acting role. This choice reflected her desire to maintain normalcy and strength in the face of adversity, preserving a sense of control amid uncertainty. But after the film's premiere, she retreated from public life, choosing privacy as her shield. Those close to the Travolta family noticed the change, respecting Kelly's need for peace and focusing on healing. Meanwhile, John stood by her unwaveringly, supporting her through every challenge. Having endured similar battles with cancer through his mother and first love, he nonetheless hoped this time would be different, that Kelly could defy the odds. Unfortunately, cancer proved relentless. On July 12, 2020, Kelly Preston lost her battle at the age of 57. Her passing was met with worldwide sympathy. For John and their children, Ella and Benjamin, it was a devastating loss unlike any other. John announced Kelly's death on Instagram with a message of gratitude for her medical team and loved ones, and promised to take time away from work to care for his family. Breast cancer snatched away John's kin for the 3rd time with this death, and it was very painful for him because 3 women had died of the same disease in a span of 30 years. Besides these recurring losses, John also bore the brunt of Jet's sudden death, and that made his burden heavier. The enormity of this grief proved to be an ordeal even for John and his already remarkable strength and resilience. John, during the months after Kelly's passing, started talking about his grief in an unusually candid manner for a celebrity. He shared his experiences through interviews, giving out insights from his decades of mourning, and giving the chance to millions to be touched by his sincere reflections, who found comfort in them. John pointed out that grieving is a very individual experience and that it must not be hurried. Everyone has to find their own way to healing. John shared a remarkable insight. He felt that after Kelly's death, his mourning was confined to a very small space because he was so consumed by the sadness of the others. He invited people to let the grieving ones be and not entangle their mourning with the emotions of their personal sorrow. His kind and wise words enlightened the audience about the fine line that has to be walked when one is trying to offer support to the suffering and at the same time not to surpass them in their endurance. Life's cruel challenges continued to test this family, but amid tragedy, John Travolta's story emerged as a testament to resilience and the power of hope. John Travolta's resilience and new beginning. After decades marked by unimaginable loss and grief, John Travolta has reached a place of renewed strength and healing. Now in his 70s, he's stepping back into life with a spirit that's both resilient and hopeful. Though cancer took so much from him, the women he loved and his son, John refuses to let grief define the rest of his story. Instead, he's embracing joy, family, and the beauty life still offers. In recent years, John has been more open about his journey through mourning than ever before. His willingness to speak candidly about grief has resonated deeply with millions, offering comfort to those facing their own painful losses. He emphasizes that healing is not linear and that every person's path through sorrow is unique. This honest vulnerability is rare in Hollywood, where strength is often equated with silence. John understands the delicate balance of honoring loved ones while moving forward. He shares that loving memory does not require living in sadness, a perspective born from years of profound pain. He has learned to hold on to memories without becoming trapped by them, choosing to celebrate life even in the shadow of loss. This philosophy has helped him rediscover laughter, adventure, and genuine happiness. Traveling with his children, attending the 2024 Paris Olympics, and enjoying world-class experiences has rekindled a light many thought had dimmed. Friends note a sparkling vitality returning to John, a sign that he is finally living fully once again. This transformation is not a denial of his past, but a courageous embrace of the future. John is also committed to teaching his children about grief and resilience openly. He talks honestly with his youngest son, Benjamin, about loss and the natural fears it can evoke. This transparent parenting reflects John's growth and his dedication to preparing his family for life's challenges with courage and compassion. His kindness is not limited to his own sphere. John gives the time and money to people that he feels close to. In particular, support for children with disabilities. His son Jet is thereby still supported. In such a manner, John can turn his pain into a more than just human quality act. He is slowly offering his warmth to the others who need help. His warmth. Through all that has happened, John still is a dancing and flying person, which were two of the passions that came along with him throughout his life. The significations of these activities are that they bring him freedom and happiness. Hence, they are like the ground upon which he stands during the trials. They are the reminders of the fact that heartaches do not mean complete withdrawal from the world. One can still find the edges of life where pleasure and purpose exist. Not only that, but John's story is also a parable of people's power, showing how the mightiest of all forces, suffering, can be turned into something good, how the tears of heartache can water the seeds of spiritual growth. His life says that mourning is not the final part, but rather a stage in the continuing process of longing and discovering the meaning of life. John Travolta's way of handling the loss is a tutor for us all. Mourning can be full, and one still lives fully. The past can be paid respect to without giving up on the future. John Travolta's story reminds us that even in the face of crushing loss, resilience and hope can prevail. His journey through grief teaches us that healing is deeply personal but always possible. If his courage and openness moved you, please like this video, subscribe for more stories that inspire and uplift, and stay with us to watch the next powerful story waiting on your screen.